We're gonna have to have a prayer volunteer, guys. Oh, we started. All right. Hello, everyone. It is a beautiful day. It is episode 110 of Roadmap for a Moral Society. We are here today to discuss a lot of different subjects. Subject today is still purity of intention. We're doing a lot, talking about a lot of stuff. We spoke in the very beginning about 109 sessions ago, as this is 110 sessions now, about the concepts that found the basis of what we're doing. That is, we believe there is a roadmap provided by the prophet founder of the Baha'i Faith, Bahá'u'lláh, for us to live a life that is better, different from what we have now. Though we've made a lot of progress as society, we believe that as society continues to employ certain rules, certain laws, it acknowledges and respects and uses for its continued growth, evolution, and just generally development as humanity continues to find commonality with every other person in the planet. We have no choice but to recognize our oneness as humanity, our oneness as one people on one planet, this planet being our homeland, not just these individual countries that we belong to, which are important. Borders can be important. We need to have a lot of important things in our planet to make a planet whole. But the idea of our common oneness, the oneness of humanity, the oneness of God, the oneness of religion. With that being said, for those of you who are just joining us, if you haven't seen these episodes before, we welcome you to check them out on Clearwater Baha'is on YouTube. Of course, the Baha'i Center of Clearwater on Facebook is also hosting these sessions. Besides Clearwater Baha'i sessions that we have for this, we have plenty of other topics. We have Baha'i explorations sessions on Sunday that you're all welcome to join. If you like and subscribe, you'll see more content. You can save more content. And we look forward to, of course, having you join our Zoom sessions if you visit clearwaterbaha'is.org. With that being said, our subject today, as we've now moved on to the covenant and testament of God, we were speaking of purity of motive and action, but now we've moved on to the covenant and testament of God. That's our topic today. And if you go back to 109, 108, 107, you'll see what we spoke about last, about purity. Very good subject. Intention is very important in the way we do our deeds with purity of thought. I did ask at the beginning when we were starting if we would have a volunteer, someone to say a prayer to start us off with a spiritual mindset as we share our individual opinions, our individual thoughts and reflections as we review these quotes together, some of which are provisional translations. Some you'll find authentic writings that are in the library online at the Baha'i Library, Ocean 2.0 Interfaith Reader, oceanlibrary.com, reference.baha'i.org. These websites are great places to find the Baha'i writings. That being said, some are in Farsi, translated to English provisionally. We have provisional translations. So we have an opening prayer. Arya there? Arya!
Hello.
Let's have an opening prayer, Arya.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Sure. Okay. I adjure thee by thy might, O my God. Let no harm beset me in times of test, and in moments of heedlessness. Guide my steps aright thine inspiration. Thou art God. Potent art thou to do what thou desirest. No one can withstand thy will or thwart thy purpose.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Arya. So we usually have Mr. Gilbert Hakim, who has gone through the hard work of putting these slides together, usually hosting and continuing the conversation. With that being said, all of us here are able to read. Those of us who wish to read and wish to read the quotes out loud, you are welcome to unmute yourself so we can hear your beautiful voice as we read these quotes together. To start, again, the topic today is the Covenant and Testament of God. We're going to read from the Baha'i writings, be it authentic quotes you'll find on the reference library or provisional quotations from the original Farsi or Arabic. We're going to be reviewing them, looking at them, discussing them together today. So Jeremiah, if you could please take us to the next slide. So before we get to the next quotes from Baha'u'lláh, the covenant and testament of God as reflected in the institution of sacred and infallible authorities in the cause of God after the ascension of His Holiness Baha'u'lláh to the Abha kingdom. All right. So let's go to the quote from His Holiness Baha'u'lláh. So we have our first reader volunteer.
I will.
Welcome, please.
When the ocean of my presence hath ebbed, and the book of my revelation is ended, turn your faces toward him whom God hath purposed, who hath branched from this ancient root, Kitáb-i-Aqdas. And I'll just go further, shall I? O people of the world, when the mystic dove will have winged its flight from its sanctuary of praise and sought its far-off goal, its hidden habitation, refer ye whatsoever ye understand not in the book to him whom hath branched from this mighty stock. Kitáb-i-Aqdas, paragraph 174.
So are there any reflections that people have? We've just read two quotes. This is, of course, about the covenant, an important subject to members of every religion that forms really a covenant. So something to consider, what is a covenant? Does anyone have a dictionary definition of what a covenant is?
It's a binding agreement between two people, two parties.
That's a good definition, yes. Yes, that is it. Yes, very much so, Sharon. So when we're talking about the covenant in the context of the Baha'i writings, the idea of a covenant, what are we talking about?
Once there's a covenant, what comes with it, it's not just a set of book of laws or a book of guidance, it's also accountability in the next world. And realizing the severity of the covenant, that is basically a spiritual and moral mandate, that ultimately when our soul moves into that next realm of existence, will be held accountable for its obedience to that covenant.
Can I just share something about the describing the Baha'i Covenant, just a little bit?
Yes, please.
Okay?
Welcome, Sharon.
It is indubitably clear, furthermore, this is from God passes by, that the pivot of the oneness, this is how important the covenant is, the pivot of the oneness of mankind is nothing else but the power of the covenant. Know thou, he has written, that the sure handle mentioned from the foundation of the world in the books of tablets in the scriptures of old is naught else but the covenant and the testament. And again, the lamp of the covenant is the light of the world, and the words traced by the pen of the Most High is high, a limitless ocean. The Lord, the all glorified, has moreover declared, hath beneath the shade of the tree of Anisa, the tree of life, made a new covenant and established a great testament. Has such a covenant been established in any, and this is really important, in any previous dispensation, age, period, or century? Has such a testament set down by the pen of the Most High ever been witnessed? No, by God. And finally, the power of the covenant is as the heat of the sun, which quickeneth and promoteth the development of all created things on earth, and so on. I won't go on, but I couldn't talk about the covenant without doing.
Thank you for sharing that. So the covenant, this concept, it's a pretty old idea, right? Something that has been discussed for millennia in religion, right? Can we say that?
That's correct, John, but nothing like this. There have been covenants in the past, but this covenant, and we'll explore why this is, so astounding as we go.
Okay, so when we go to the time of Noah, there was a covenant in the Bible. So for people who are trying to figure out what the covenant is, are Baha'is talking about the same covenant that you'll find since the time of Noah?
Yeah, because God said he would never leave man alone. And they're, according to the reality on the ground, at that time, it was binding, and it is continuously, progressively maturing and preparing itself for that new race of men.
Could you give a brief example, just in short, how this revelation is slightly different in the covenant compared to like the past covenants?
In my opinion, we have an added responsibility, such as all the races are one, men and women are equal. Now we have science and religion must agree. We've never had that. I mean, science at that time, especially if you look at the development of astronomy or flat earth science at that time. So it matures with man's understanding and scientific exploration. And we're getting really ready and preparing ourselves for a cosmic age that in the past was only a fleeting thought.
Thank you.
Is it okay if I just add to that? I know there's another hand up. I was just going to say this covenant is very different because when Christ covenanted with Christianity, he actually revealed very few laws. And also in this covenant, why it's so astounding is because Bahá'u'lláh, in his will and testament, appointed a centre of the covenant, which was Abdu'l-Bahá, and Abdu'l-Bahá in his turn, in his will, appointed the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi. And never before in the world history have we had this succession of guidance through Bahá'u'lláh appointing Abdu'l-Bahá as the exemplar in the centre through his will, and Abdu'l-Bahá appointing the guardian Shoghi Effendi with the provision in the future of the Universal House of Justice. That's the reason why I said in the beginning, this is a covenant like in previous dispensations has had not had this assurity of succession. Thank you.
So before we go to Sean, Sharon, just to understand a little further what you're saying, for someone who doesn't know the Baha'i faith and the concept of the covenant, how do we connect to, how do we draw a bridge of understanding to understand, or do we just have to learn this fresh from scratch? How can we draw a line from point zero to all that? I saw your hand raised, but now I see your.
Sorry, are you asking me about this?
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
Look, I know it sounds very complicated, but the reason why it is because it is unprecedented. As I've explained to you in previous dispensations, I think in Islam as well, in Islam it was the return of, it wasn't, I don't know, it was ambiguous, and that's why religions crashed and burnt, because when the Prophet passed, what happened was the believers, because they didn't have the clear guidance like a will and testament, for anybody that's interested in looking at the Baha'i Covenant itself and then contrasting it with what happened in Christianity and Islam and so on, God passes by. There are reference libraries where you can actually do a little bit of study and just have a look at and do your own comparison as to why this would be so outstanding. I mean, it does take a bit of understanding, because it's a very different kind of documentation and a different kind of covenant, which, Sabine mentioned that God covenanted with us, and he sent manifestations or prophets of God over the, a circle of prophets and so on, so as we wouldn't be left to ourselves and we'd be guided. That was his love for us. And our part of that was to respond to whom he had sent to us, to guide us and to educate us. But in this dispensation, it's gone a wee bit further, where there's been appointed after the ascension of Bahá'u'lláh, for example, there was a definite written will and testament and guidance appointing Abdu'l-Bahá as the centre of the covenant. And when Abdu'l-Bahá ascended, there is a will and testament, that is a readable document, designating the beloved guardian, Shoghi Effendi, as the guardian of the Baha'i Faith, with the provision in the future of the Universal House of Justice. I don't really have words to explain it. I think really you have to look at you have to actually get a bit assertive and do a little bit of research for yourself, because the way I'm explaining it is through a Baha'i lens, and it may be confusing to you. So it's the only way I can ever talk about this covenant, so I apologize. Sorry.
Well, the only reason for going through and talking about this is just so we can try to understand each other better. And I think it's a good point that you took some time to explain what you're saying, Sharon. I appreciate it. And it's important for all of us to, of course, read the Baha'i writings and learn about the covenant. And we're going to be doing more of that today with these quotes that we're reading. Just getting some impressions. It's good to share some ideas and thoughts. So we have Sean and then Zabine.
Hello.
Sean?
No, this is Arlene speaking.
Oh, hi, Arlene.
Yeah, well, as I understood it, the covenant was, and maybe it's already been said, I don't know, I was off for a while. It wasn't not the 10 Commandments that were engraved by God for Moses, I believe, in Mount Sinai.
I think it's definitely pretty important in the evolution of the covenant between humanity and God.
Yeah, and that's what I know. That I know there were the 10 Commandments that were engraved by God for Moses.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that very much.
When God makes, can you guys hear me?
Yes, John.
Okay. We go back to the time of Adam and Eve, which we used to believe was the beginning. But science believes that there's been life for at least 20,000 years. But when God created his creation, he needed to have a way to get them to learn to behave and how to deal with each other and how to make this world into something acceptable to the Creator. So we're all the way up now to the Baha'i, which have the cause, and it's a little bit like building a kingdom of God on earth. And this is really like something that everybody could participate in, and it gives us the cause is not only is like a covenant of behavior, but it's the first time that we've had clear direction from God about what the world, a model for the world, so to speak.
Zabine.
Well, including the Bab, all the way up to the Bab, from quote unquote symbolic Adam and Eve forward, right? We lived in the prophetic cycle. And everything within that prophetic cycle was preparing the world for what we call on earth as it is in heaven, or as we say in quantum mechanics, we now have reached the age of symmetry. What is above is below, meaning that kingdom on earth as it is in heaven, right? So therefore, when we look at the guidances or the sort of the spiritual laws of moral discipline amongst the various tribes and maturations of humanity, during that prophetic cycle, it was really what I call a getting ready for that, from the approaching the lesser piece into the greater piece. And as we're on, I call it the yellow brick road, or that bridge over troubled waters, as we're getting into this new cycle, with that now fulfillment of that greater peace, it's very, very different. It's very unique. It's global. And as the Shoghi Effendi said, we're not a new religion, for heaven's sake, no. The Baha'i Faith is not a new religion. The aim and purpose of the Baha'i Faith is to unite all of the world religions. And so our covenant now is to bring about and find common ground within those world religions. So we don't have to stand out, be different, be unique. We have to be able to learn to meditate. You know how the 4 steps, right? First you pray, then you meditate, then you study, which is what we're doing today. But it all has to lead to action. And if we don't have a step of action in our 110 lessons on building a moral society, if we don't understand that next step of action with all what we have learned in our study, we're missing the boat, because we're in it now and it has begun. It has been formally announced. And the covenant just means, as far as I can tell, not being a new religion, but having now the fulfillment of the prophetic cycle in all of its guidances prepares us now to be and act like that new race of man.
Could I just add to that? Thank you, Sabine. One of the reasons why in the past dispensations that religions, you talked about a very wonderful point. You talked about the fact that this is the time for humanity to unify, not just tribe, state, city-state, but globally. And in order to do that, and especially amongst religion, so that the past, the misunderstandings, and those kind of the kind of environment as we as humanity in our kindergarten and childlike years in our growth cycle, now we have a covenant actually, which Baha'u'lláh promises us. We have a day, this day, that will not be followed by night. And part of that quotation actually is the assurance to each and every one of us is that because this covenant has written, you know, it's unique because it's to bring about a world civilization and world unity. So therefore, for the first time, it is actually a written document. It is a legal document. It is a will and testament, and it very, very carefully points and appoints succession to it, so that on the passing of the Blessed Beauty, which is Baha'u'lláh, or the Blessed Bab, because he pointed to him whom God shall make manifest, which was the Blessed Beauty. And then Abdu'l-Bahá became the center of the covenant, and in turn on his ascension. But if you read the history of our religion and or other religions, even those centers were appointed, there were individual believers who, for whatever misguided reasons, would have said, oh no, that's not who's meant to be leading us, you know, it's so-and-so. But, you know, it's irrefutable. Nobody can refute this covenant because it's written and it's a binding document and will ensure that there is no previous repeats of behavior and disunity and fragmentation. And, you know, I personally, this is just me speaking from my own opinion, I am so grateful to God for this covenant because it assures each and every one of us that unity is not only possible, but this day will not be followed by night, meaning that the things we are ready, as we went in past dispensations, to actually go forward and connect our countries, our nation states, and our globe in one common humanity under this covenant. So I just thank you, Sabine. I just wanted to go a bit further. Thank you.
Well, this was all really important, having this discussion and sharing. One thing we want to, having spoken a bit about the covenant and the concepts and so on, clearly the Baha'i concept of the covenant has to deal with a lot of things. There's a greater covenant and there's a lesser covenant, and it's a lot to get into, but for the sake of reviewing these quotes that we have in front of us, before we move on to the next slide, there's this concept that we're being shown here about succession within the Baha'i Faith. So Baha'u'lláh, the prophet founder of the Baha'i Faith, revealed writings for us to, as Baha'is, follow to guide our lives. Likewise, the guidance for the succession of leadership in the faith was also something that is very important to Baha'is. So when you go to religions of the past, dispensations, the medicine of God coming to us, dispensation, the revelations of the past, the revealed word of God, revelations of the past. This concept that has continuously been a problem for humanity, which has really harassed us so, it's this lack of certainty of successorship, the concept of leadership after the prophet founder passes on. So for members of religions around the world, you have what's natural to religion modern day to understand schism. It's to see that you have not diverse views, which inherently isn't wrong to have diverse interpretations and views per se. You have diverse leaderships. You have completely different fundamental theological opinions among members of religion, to such point that they don't recognize each other as believers in the same God. And it's a real big problem when you'll have within the same realm of belief people who are so upset at each other that they would rather not have the other live. That's a terrible thing to have, especially in the name of God, this idea, this animosity to exist. And unfortunately, it has for millennia as well. So you'll find that, for example, one of the easiest things in the West to talk about the successorship of Christ, a lot of people have a different understanding on who is the rightful leader of the church. And you'll have people who believe in a pope, some people who believe in only their minister, some people will believe in a different pope, some people believe in a different type of leadership altogether. There's so many different types of leaderships in the Christian faith that it's very hard for someone to investigate, just read the Bible, and then figure out for themselves which leadership to follow when there are so many schools of thought. Same goes in Islam, though you'll find that there are imams or learned people to help teach you about Islam. They still fundamentally have different viewpoints on successorship of Muhammad. So after the passing of Muhammad, you had the question of successorship, if it were to be Ali to be the first imam, or in the concept of the caliphate as the Sunnis know it, you have the 12 imams in Shia Islam, and then you have the caliphate in Sunni Islam. These are all oversimplified for the time being because we're trying to get to other concepts as well. You have Hinduism, which is a collection of beliefs in the East. You have Buddhism. You have all these religions around the world with different structures and, quite honestly, very different schools, people believing completely different from each other. Geography sometimes having a lot to do with it, just as much as the time in which they came and the lack of communication. In essence, what we're reading here, we are shown as Baha'is that there is a successor to Baha'u'lláh, that there is a person who Baha'is must turn to following Baha'u'llah's passing. So in this case, in the first quote, we are told, "Turn your faces towards him whom God hath purposed, who hath branched from this ancient root." Following that again, we are told, "Refer ye whatsoever ye understand not in the book of him." Refer ye whatsoever ye understand not in the book to him who hath branched from this mighty stock. So Baha'is believe that Abdu'l-Bahá, which means in English servant of Baha or servant of the glory, servant of light, servant of splendor, servant of Baha'u'lláh, that Abdu'l-Bahá is this successor to Baha'u'lláh. And Abdu'l-Bahá is also known as the center of the covenant. Now, we're going to discuss a little more as we go to the next page, the next slide. If Jeremiah could take us to the next slide, please. So now that we are on this next slide, could we have another volunteer to read?
Endowments dedicated to charity revert to God. The revealer of signs. None hath the right to dispose of them without leave from him who is the dawning place of revelation. After him, this authority shall pass to the Aqsan, and after them to the house of justice. Should it be established in the world by them, that they may use these endowments for the benefit of the places which have been exalted in this cause, and for whatsoever hath been enjoined upon them by him who is the God of might and power. Otherwise, the endowments shall revert to the people of Baha, who speak not except by his leave, and judge not save in accordance with what God hath decreed and established. Lo, they are the champions of victory betwixt heaven and earth, that they may use them in the manner that hath been laid down in the book by God, the mighty, the bountiful.
There's so much to unpack here. So right here in the Kitáb-i-Aqdas, which was revealed by Baha'u'lláh, we have this succession that we spoke about that is laid out. So the Aqsan is the branches. The branches are the male descendants of Baha'u'lláh that are referenced, that are the I think I just said it, that the male descendants of Baha'u'lláh that are referenced. So in this context, you have the House of Justice, which is following the Aqsan. So you have the context here being provided that there's, after Baha'u'lláh, the Aqsan, the male descendants, and then after that to the House of Justice. So there's so much to be spoken of here. As we understand, there's this concept that's brought forth, Huqúqu'lláh, which is the right of God. You have the concept of the head of the faith. You have the concept of the covenant. A lot of concepts are going on here that really we would be best served breaking them down and understanding them together. So here's a question to everyone here. Do we know the title of Abdu'l-Bahá as it relates to being one of the Aqsan? Anyone here who can offer?
What do you mean by that? Like the title? Like the master? Like what do you mean by that?
So the master is one of his titles, but as it relates to Aqsan, he is called something related to the word branch. Do you know the name?
The most holy branch.
Okay. Any others?
You might just have to just say it. I think we.
And the other thing too is just about that is that he's also designated as a mystery of God, because although he didn't have the station of his father, obviously he wasn't a manifestation of God, yet he retained such a high station that he was referred to as a mystery of God as well. That's another designated title. I'm just trying to think of the actual branch. It's the most holy. I'll look it up. Thank you. Yeah.
So
No worries.
That is the most great branch.
Thanks, John.
The reason for speaking to that point is that the Aqsan, the branches, you have of course, several sons, and the most great branch, the eldest son of Baha'u'lláh, Abdu'l-Bahá, was the chosen successor. And as it relates to the Ahsan, it's a very interesting concept to think about. And as we're going through, definitely, as Sharon was saying, it would be a very wise idea to look into the titles of Abdu'l-Bahá. Likewise, looking into his life and what he did, how his life began, and all the way to all the service that he did and to its end. He was born in 1844, May 23rd, 1844. He lived a life full of suffering, exile. He was the first believer of Baha'u'lláh. He was the first believer in Baha'u'lláh since
childhood.
he was a child, not even 10 years old. And then all the way throughout his life, he endured exile, 40 years of exile with Baha'u'lláh. And further to it, he, being thrust the mantle of leadership, had to deal with the chaos of not just the politics of the fall of the Ottoman Empire and all that had to deal with his life becoming more difficult, but also members of his own family, also exiles that had misunderstandings. And further to it, there's, after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the travels he had to the West, going through all these travels to share the message with the rest of the world. And then, of course, the horrors of World War I and the sorrows that it brought with it. He, being blessed with foresight that a lot of us don't have, arranged for many people to come together to farm and to store food so that the starvation that was to follow in World War I, where the blockade had caused so many people to starve, he was able to avoid that by, again, all that foresight, providing food to the people who would have otherwise starved in World War I. And then, of course, by 1921, his passing. So just a few years ago, we observed the centenary of the passing of Abdu'l-Bahá. And at this moment today, they are still at work while the bombs are being lobbed in the air above the Holy Land. They are finally finishing the final resting place of Abdu'l-Bahá that has been a century in the making. With that all being said, this concept of successorship is something that every time God has revealed himself to humanity through these messengers of God, humanity has had a hard time accepting that the message isn't just what is brought, but it's a living message that is continually one that requires obedience. And a part of that obedience is obedience to the successor that the messenger of God chooses. For Christians, we won't know who the successor truly was because it wasn't written down. And those who heard, I have no doubt they faithfully tried to execute. The reality is that the world does not agree with itself on who the successor was. Following that, in Islam, likewise, though Muhammad may have chosen a successor, many people still do not agree on who the chosen successor was, or even if that was the proper choice. Even if people may agree on something being said, they may not agree that it should have been said or was valuable or was something that should have happened. It's a mind-boggling, because so too when you go to the Baha'i writings, though the Baha'i community is united around this concept, it's not without attempts to attack the validity of the successorship of the faith. It's not without people questioning and without the suffering that it really brought with it. So
I have a
as
question.
yes,
Why has it been so challenging for humanity to accept these manifestations?
Great question.
well, there's a lot of answers, and I can say just a personal input as a blunt answer. It's obedience, and truly the lack of understanding of what obedience is. So there's a story actually about Abdu'l-Bahá, and this is found in The Priceless Pearl. And again, obedience is a huge concept, because in The Priceless Pearl, Ria Khanum recollects the suffering that Shoghi Effendi had to endure because Abdu'l-Bahá specifically requested a telegraph be sent to Shoghi Effendi, who was then in college in the United Kingdom at the time. And that request to send a telegraph was to send for Shoghi Effendi to return to the Holy Land at once. This is in 1921, before Abdu'l-Bahá passes away. Thinking that they knew better, that they would save money, Abdu'l-Bahá's wife and daughter thought it best to send a letter. Now, these are, again, this is the wife and daughter of Abdu'l-Bahá, thinking that they know best. They're going to do what he said. They're going to send a letter to ask for Shoghi Effendi to come home at once. Now, they say hindsight is 20/20. However, if we just simply engage in obedience, there's no need to even really discuss it. But the fact is that didn't happen. And what ended up happening was that Shoghi Effendi did not get to see Abdu'l-Bahá before Abdu'l-Bahá passed, because he never received a telegraph. And he found out in a very inappropriate way compared to how it would have been had Abdu'l-Bahá's guidance actually been followed. So we talk about obedience, and we talk about people also with the best of intentions, thinking that they're doing a good thing, still disobeying and witnessing the calamity that ensues, which for Shoghi Effendi, he never really came back from that.
John, if they'd had a local assembly, they would have gotten guidance as to the right way of, of not following their own volition, but actually in a consultative process, the wisdom of what action should have been taken. If that was this day, would have happened. Sorry, just to say that, but that's why this covenant. That's why the administrative order. That is why some of the things that you're saying that happened in the early stages of our faith were because of the ongoing development of the protection, the arc of protection for each and every one of us in our communities. Sorry, just had to add that to it.
Well, the intriguing point of this, though the assemblies they consult and they take the time to engage in consultation and then come up again, they have a decision. Once the decision's been made by an assembly, the concept of obedience doesn't change. That obedience that we have to an assembly it's the enactment of what is decided upon. So,
John, what I'm trying to say is that we can't just run, in terms of the growth and development and the cohesion and our ongoing development, both as individuals, communities, and institutions. What I'm saying is the added protection is it helps not to go off on a tangent. It helps with the wisdom of collective consultation. I mean, the Guardian passed out. I know the story, and every Baha'i knows how terrible that was and how that could have been avoided. It was awful and a very good example. But my point is that aren't we lucky that, mistakes are going to happen, but mistakes are more minimalized when we have cohesion in our decision making, especially around huge things that are going to affect all of us, was my point. Thank you.
Also, just wanted to say, adding to that, for example, if you had that sort of unity, for example, during the time of when Muhammad passed, maybe the outcome would have been different. So I guess there really is a wisdom in being obedient.
Well, I mean, when you go back to that time, the unity that they had at that time, a lot of people were united in believing that they would only go by the Quran and not by what Muhammad had specifically requested verbally. So,
but it was still a choice that people made. So,
what I'm saying is, the concept of obedience to God, it still is important. So let's if we look at some examples, we had at one point when America was very it was like an apartheid state in the early 1900s. Though it was progressive, you still had Black people and white people that were separated from each other. They wouldn't commingle in many circles. And the Baha'is who were entering the faith were not necessarily believing in all the unity that needs to be had. The reality of the matter is you had people who would be with their own people as they viewed their own people. And that's a problem when you're talking about having diversity. So it doesn't matter that they were united in their segregation. That was not right. So unity is important so long as it's around the central pivot of obedience to God.
Can I just say to you, John, also, and also to you, Aria, I just want to backtrack to when Abdu'l-Bahá was 7. Now, how outstanding is this? A 7-year-old child. Now, there were ecclesiastics, there were academics, there were all sorts of people, and this son, Abdu'l-Bahá, at 7 years old, actually recognized the station not only of his father, but of a manifestation of God. And you can't have obedience without love. The never-ending law of divine love, no matter what's happened in any religion, that love is the first intimator of being able to turn your face to the source of who you are, know your reality, and obedience. Because of that love, obedience is a necessity. But you cannot, as you can see around the world, you can look at Gaza, Israel, you can look at any country that's had genocide, and force in this faith is forbidden. And so what does that imply? Instead of the previous forcing, hating, racism, nationalism, communism, what have we got? We have the means, the healing means to start a new day and begin with the reality of, without love, nothing else is very possible, because people will do what they want to do. But if there's a higher calling within them to love and to be loved, they're going to give it quite a lot, is my point. And Abdu'l-Bahá also, as a child, saw his father in the seashell with chains around him. And he was taken from, he suffered. The life of Abdu'l-Bahá is worth mega movies and whatever else, because he was the archetypical human being. And when we're told the mystery of God, I am nowhere near understanding that. But when we look at these people, they're given to us as beacons so that they can, their light and getting to know and understand what they've left, their legacy to us, is the light of our lives too. A 7-year-old child. And there were adults who could not and were veiled from recognizing the manifestation of God today. And my point being is that people fall in love. They actually turn to and recognize and become believers in things because their hearts, their innermost, their rational faculty, which is not disavowing intellect, but their actual real essence is changed. My point. Thank you. Sorry about the rave.
So there's a lot to learn from each other, but the concept of the covenant is definitely one that we ingrain into ourselves when we think about words such as obedience, promise. Covenant is also known as a promise. And ultimately speaking, as was described as well, this concept that it's one that has to be born from your own volition, your own will. It has to be something that you need to decide for yourself. Every single person individually needs to realize it, internalize it, and act upon it. It's not something that's just blindly followed. It's something that you need to have, you need to put work into understanding it so you have that certitude. So it's definitely a process, but the idea that there's this covenant that protects us from schism, such that the message that we have from Baha'u'lláh, it's not a matter of which school of thought that we ascribe to. It's a matter of realizing this changeless faith of God, eternal in the past, eternal in the future, to be able to believe in the same message now in about 900 years from now. That is one of the miracles of this new revelation that we have, unlike the messages of the past, where yes, we understand that the generation will still occur naturally to the message, the Baha'i message that we have, in the context of every religion having its springtime and then its winter season. But there is fundamentally principles that we have been given as Baha'is by Baha'u'lláh that did not exist before, and through its existence will endure many years to come. And
John, 500,000 years is the endurance. That is the coverage of this covenant and this dispensation, whether or not in 1,000 year, the expiration of 1,000 years, we have another manifestation recognized. We still have this cloak, this protective cloak of 500,000 years as well, is my point. Thank you.
Well, I'm not entirely sure about that concept, because you have the concept of a dispensation, which we know will last at least 1,000 years. However, an era, the Adamic cycle, for example, that happened for so long, however long it lasted, the people did not per se believe in Adam. By the end of the dispensation of Muhammad and coming with Baha'u'lláh, many people believe Adam as a regular human who gave sin to the world. Although as Baha'is we believe that Adam was a manifestation of God, many people do not agree with that idea, and they do not even pay homage to the divinity of Adam. So
Great. I understand that, John. I really do understand that. But, you know, the hands of the cause, it is textually relevant. 500, this dispensation, 500,000 years. I will try to locate the source of that, but the hands of the cause of God, whom I trust implicitly, quote, and there it is in tablets of Baha'u'lláh. So forgive me, whatever happens to this faith, my point being, and what you're saying, I'm support what you're saying. you know, but you know, 500,000 years is quite a different, you know, because if this is humanity's adulthood, this prophetic cycle is very, very unique and different to the past, given not because of the, you know, any manifestation. There is a unity of prophethood. That is not a question, you know, pre-existent before their mission on this, depending which revelation. My point being, though, that the unique characteristics of this particular dispensation, because of what it requires for the maturity of the human race and its unification and its commonwealth, global commonwealth, is that whether or not there is ere the expiration of 1,000 years a prophet of God, and you know that's what, you know, that cycle. My point being that there is an over covering 500,000 year provision is my point. So, like, I'm sorry, but you know, I have read and I do know that that is a provision. So, like, I don't want to argue, but I don't want to give false facts. That's all. Thank you.
And respectfully, when we say stuff and there's a difference of opinion, we should bring up the context, actually citing our sources. And the reason I'm saying this is because we'll have a lot of people in society that they'll believe very wholeheartedly something that they believe to be true, and they, as much as our oral testimony is great to listen to, the issue is that we don't live in a time that is without books. We don't need to rely on the oral tradition when we can literally pull our source and say where we're getting it from.
Okay, John, look, I hear what you're saying, and I know for sure it's a fact. I'm 76 years old. Somehow I will find it. I will get it to you written, because I know it's a fact. But you're right. I just can't orally say that. I understand that. It's contextual, and, you know, there are many, many tablets that Abdu'l-Bahá and many other scholars have revealed. And some of those sources, you know, are not available to the general population. You've got to really look for them. But I appreciate what you're saying, and I thank you for your care and concern about, you know, people saying things and people running off with the wrong idea. So respectfully, I thank you, and I shall try and get the facts, you know, written, or, you know, verification, so to speak. Thank you.
So with that being said, my hope was, for the sake of what we're reviewing, to go over some concepts with each other, and those concepts to look at words, what do they mean, and then build them into what we're discussing, which the words on the screen, that is, on the slides. So I imagine a lot of people don't know what the word dispensation means, that may be coming in and just hearing the terminology for the first time. Can someone say what the word dispensation means and what it alludes to? I'll give the hint of the divine physician. If someone would like to expound on that, someone who's here today, dispensation.
Can you pull up the definition, maybe? Or if that helps?
So dispensation. So to dispense would be to dispense medication. So to dispense means to provide, to produce. So if you go to an apothecary is someone who produces medicine. A dispensary, they will produce the healing medication that the doctor prescribes so that you can cure an ailment. So Baha'u'lláh likens himself to the divine physician. And every divine physician, manifestation of God, be it Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, they have a dispensation. So this dispensation, which is unique to a manifestation of God, is one that is characterized by a healing message, which is a prescription for the ills of the age in which the prophet appears. So in this case, Baha'u'lláh, this roadmap, if you will, is that dispensation, that needed prescription for us to heal the wounds that humanity has caused itself, to heal the ills which humanity is sick with, and by doing so, to be living a healthier life. So this idea of a divine physician, which Baha'u'lláh refers to, the manifestation of God, which we can find in Ocean 2.0, just look up the word divine physician. There are plenty of quotes where Baha'u'lláh describes the manifestation of God as that divine physician, and the healing message being kept from humanity. So long as the divine physician's kept from healing the ills of the age will only worsen, and the problems will increase in magnitude and frequency. So
John, dispensation meaning like there are cycles like the Adamic cycles. So in your description of dispensation, you're talking about an allotted period of time for each of the prophets of God. Jesus, Buddha, Zoroaster, Muhammad, each had a dispensation, an allotted period of time in which to spread their message and bring their healing message and raise humanity to another level of development, correct?
Yes, that's another way to see it, yes. So with that being said, when we're talking about this third quote, this idea of mentioning the endowments dedicated to charity, revert to God, the revealer of signs, this concept that is brought about, the passing of authority, all of this is a part of the dispensation of Baha'u'lláh, this healing message to cure the ills of the age. And in this case, there's also the description of endowments. Does anyone have an idea what's being referred to? Because endowments are, in a typical sense, donations that are made. Typically, in the American sphere, you'll have endowments which set up large institutions. In this country, you'll have subject matter, for example, endowment creating a library, for example, endowment creating a building at a school so that they can teach certain classes. You'll have different kinds of endowments, but they're charitable in nature, and they're in America, as they're now known, they're typically sizable. But an endowment doesn't necessarily have to be the American view of endowment. An endowment can be something that's variable in size and content. It doesn't have to be just one way. Endowments are, in a large sense of it, it's charity that is given, again, for a charitable purpose. Whatever that purpose is the purpose of the endowment.
And John, in this particular paragraph here, it's a very specific kind of endowment, because in the Baha'i Faith, only Baha'is can give to the Huqúqu'lláh and the fund. And therefore, what this is talking about is on the passing, where those endowments or those funds that have been voluntarily given for the needs of the faith itself. That's why probably the trustee was the trustee of that funding. And so the endowment, in this context, is really a particular thing to the fact that nobody else but Baha'is can give to the fund. There's no force or whatever. It's a voluntary giving, and
Yeah, but Sharon, explain Huqúqu'lláh a little bit, because I know there's the fund, but you touched on Huqúqu'lláh, this endowment. Could you get to?
No, sorry, I apologize. I'm just talking. I just really wanted to. You were talking about and very beautifully describing what, in the larger sense, and in what most people's understanding, what endowment would mean given your culture and your country. All I was trying to say is just give the contrast to that, because you know, endowment, in terms of this being under the auspice of the faith, is the whole point of you know, Baha'i money, so to speak, is that it's under no compulsion and it's given voluntarily by Baha'is and only Baha'is. That's my point. So therefore, the dispersion of it here is to the families and that, because it's like it's a Baha'i fund, notably, rather than, you know, it's not a charitable or it is a particular endowment of funds given from other Baha'is, is my point. Sorry.
I'm trying to understand your point, and I'm not sure maybe a lot of other people understood, but just for my personal edification to understand what you're saying, the fund you're referring to, are you referring to the Baha'i funds or to Huqúqu'lláh, which the head of the faith is in control of?
The overall arching thing I'm referring to is the difference between charities and other kinds of, how would you say, ordinary endowments in society to endowments in Baha'i societies, because all of them, and there are no funds from without, given from without, all Baha'is give to the fund, and all the funding comes from Baha'is, is my point. Meaning that, you know, you can't go, for example, as a Baha'i and, you know, and ask for a, you know, other people can get funding from various bodies, charitable bodies and so on, for their good works. My point being that uniquely the Baha'i fund itself, whether it's Huqúqu'lláh, whatever it is given by Baha'is for the Baha'i fund, and only Baha'is give to it. Sorry, John, that is my point, the differentiation point, rather than it being a secular endowment. Thank you.
Thank you for explaining that. So you, Sharon just explained a lot of the concepts of Baha'is giving to the Baha'i fund, and if I understand correctly in this quote, just to get us to the next quote, if we can, it was 921. Just, I guess, finishing this quote here that we had before us, it seems, and again, someone may have a better way to express this, but it seems that we're discussing the subject of Huqúqu'lláh, the right of God, and the concept of giving a donation to Huqúqu'lláh and who is in charge of Huqúqu'lláh. So the manifestation of God, Baha'u'lláh, during his life, would be the recipient of Huqúqu'lláh, the right of God. Following Baha'u'lláh, the recipient would be Abdu'l-Bahá, then it was Shoghi Effendi, and then following, it is now the Universal House of Justice. The institution of Huqúqu'lláh, the right of God, is a means by which the head of the faith is provided with resources that are then used to do whatever it wishes to do. At this moment, you'll find that there are shrines in Haifa, Israel. You'll find the shrine of Baha'u'lláh in Bahji, Israel. You'll find properties that are holy places for Baha'is that are maintained by the Universal House of Justice. When people give to Huqúqu'lláh, you'll find that these places of pilgrimage, which are maintained by these funds, are not just, of course, kept in a condition that is acceptable. When you go, you're able to, I would say the words, enjoy the spiritual atmosphere, but you're also seeing the emergence of the shrine of Abdu'l-Bahá, who we've spoken of today, that for a whole century, it it was in the making, and finally there is going to be a resting place for Abdu'l-Bahá. His remains are currently, his resting place is currently in the same place as the Shrine of the Bab. So that was not meant to be his final resting place. However, now that the funds have been made available to do this, the Shrine of Abdu'l-Bahá is going to be completed soon. But these important aspects are not just the only thing that Huqúqu'lláh, of course, supports. During the COVID pandemic, there were some communities that were actually not just suffering, but they were in dire straits. The Universal House of Justice did something about that to assist these communities. You had, unfortunately, you have Baha'i persecution that occurs still to this day around the world, and you had some I would say lucky people who were not martyred on for their beliefs, that they get to live to practice and share their faith. They were unfortunately going to be put to death, but they were released, and the Universal House of Justice supplied the means for them to save their lives and be removed. So you have a lot of circumstances in the world, very unique circumstances, in which Huqúqu'lláh, through the Universal House of Justice, has been put to use. Back in Abdu'l-Bahá's time, with regards to the famine that was going to occur in Israel, or at that time called Palestine, the territory of the British Empire, or no, it was before that, the Ottoman Empire during World War I. So during World War I, the British had a blockade and the Allied forces. The people of that region were starving. And again, as was mentioned earlier, Abdu'l-Bahá, with his foresight, had made sure that a very large stockpile of food was available so people wouldn't starve. And all of this that Abdu'l-Bahá did was not just simply Abdu'l-Bahá himself through anything that he had being in exile and a prisoner his whole life. Huqúqu'lláh, which is the right of God, was available as a means by which Abdu'l-Bahá could, again, enact this plan. So you had Baha'is who came from Iran who were experts at farming in drought conditions. I believe they were from Yazd. Their expertise and resources were put to work to grow crops. And modern day, it's actually, I think, called the Golan Heights. So you have this demilitarized zone, if you will, an area of the buffer between Jordan and Israel. That area is where a lot of the Baha'is had grown crops, actually. And these crops were stockpiled, and again, they were used to feed the starving masses. An amazing accomplishment, so much so that though Abdu'l-Bahá himself found it cumbersome to have to attend, he was even knighted for this effort because of how valiant it was, given all the other circumstances where you had soldiers who would raid for food. He was able to arrange for the food to be kept for the people and not the scouring soldiers who would have stolen the food had they known it was there. So a lot of work went into making sure that people would not starve, a lot of work. And the reality of the matter is that Huqúqu'lláh, were it not for that agency, which is available by which people donate to it, and again, the head of the faith utilizes that to enact these types of efforts, these endeavors, you wouldn't be able to see a society benefit in which it has been able to, with the limited might and resource it actually has. So as Sharon very well put, only Baha'is have the bounty of donating. So there is no donation allowed from outside persons. So no one can influence decision-making by any means. So we all know, especially in America, that people are usually given donations, and therefore it is automatically scrutinized that someone's decision making is somehow changed by the donors that they have. So this integrity of the faith and its institutions being so important, having donations only from Baha'is who are giving in the context of the pure charity itself, not having ulterior motives, it really guards us against this idea of questions of integrity. Again, it's a very important rule. It's not something that when we think of integrity that maybe someone may automatically think about, but
I'm sorry, brother. I think it's a very beautiful explanation you're giving, but so what does this mean, just in simple terms? Because I still don't understand the passage.
I'm not
in simple terms.
I'm not going to interpret the passage, but what I understand from it, just my humble understanding, is that there is an institution which provides for charity, and this institution is in the hands of the leader of the faith. And the leader of the faith decides how the money is spent. And the successorship of the faith is from Bahá'u'lláh to Abdu'l-Bahá and any Ahsan that is alive. And after the Ahsan, the descendants of Bahá'u'lláh, it is to the House of Justice to administer.
So
Very
in other
nice.
words,
Thank you.
So in other words, Aria, because it's a Baha'i fund, people just can't come and help themselves. It has to be designated the next in line, then take responsibility and so on. Is that easy? Yeah.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So it's about 9:30, and it's a good time for us to wrap up for tonight with a beautiful closing prayer from one of our volunteer participants. If someone here is wishing to close with a closing prayer, we will greatly appreciate it, and we will promptly then end the session. Prior to the closing prayer, as someone is getting that prayer ready, we remind you please to subscribe to Clearwater Baha'is so you can see the session next week. If you haven't seen the previous sessions, please look at the playlist for the roadmap, and you'll be seeing all of the 109 other sessions. So we welcome you please to view them, and if you have not already seen, please go to clearwaterbaha'is.org, and you're welcome to join the Zoom session as well when it happens next week at 8 p.m. Eastern, local to Florida.